We've got James and Stephen. You guys are still with me, aren't you?
Yes, we are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's good to hear. Okay, well, I'm coming to you from very wet Auckland. There's a lot of sodden ground around here. There's been a few floods, in case anyone wasn't sure. I think most people connecting are from Auckland, but those people who aren't, just so you know, we had to actually move everything to a different location due to the weather. There was meant to be thunderstorms and more rain today, which was not going to be too much fun. So it was well worth, I think, moving things to be a little bit safer. Don't want people driving into the city of Auckland City to accidentally get trapped, which some people did a short time ago, and it wasn't too great. So today I've got Steve Jenner and I've got James Llewellyn, who's that's pronounced correctly, isn't it? Like,
yeah,
Welsh
perfect.
always gets me, James.
Right.
Okay, good. I've got these two project management experts. So of course, Steve Jenner is a benefits guru, well known in the benefits space. Wrote Managing Benefits, the guidance, which a lot of people are referencing when they want to create their benefit frameworks and various other sort of activities to ensure their benefits are well managed. So it's primarily a networking event. We've got we usually host these at Chuff Cafe in Auckland. So next month in March, we're going to be doing the same thing again with Ruth Murray Webster, who's a risk expert. For those people at the cafe, it's a networking event to be able to get some like-minded people connecting and getting a bit of knowledge, sharing a bit of knowledge around project management, whether it be risk management, benefits management, scheduling, you name it, anything that we feel as though is going to make a difference in the projects that are delivered by New Zealand organisations. So for those people who are watching this as a recording, feel free to come back and register on more of these events. The technology will be sorted by the next one. We ensure it. And we'd like to basically, I think I'll just get straight in and get Steve telling us about his concepts of benefits and his interest in benefits, and he'll be talking to us for about 15 minutes, and then we'll move on to James. So you happy if I give you the floor there, Steve?
Absolutely. My turn. Right. So hopefully you are seeing my slides.
Yep. I think there's about a 10 seconds when I wait.
Well, I mean, 15 minutes and to talk about benefits. So, we could talk for hours. But Scott, you asked me to kind of focus on this whole issue of benefits-focused projects today, and then tomorrow I'm going to do a follow-up session for our friends in Wellington. But since it's online, we can all be there on some insights into benefits management. What's the difference that makes the difference? But first of all, looking at benefits-focused projects. I suppose a stake in the ground, first of all, just to make this point, because it's so important that ultimately benefits management isn't just one other aspect. Risk management, cost management, scope management, whatever we like, and then we have benefits management. No, benefits are the rationale for the investments. Why we do stuff. Why we invest in change to realize benefits, to make things better. We're taking taxpayers' money or we're taking shareholders' money and we're investing it to hopefully deliver more value, and value being the essentially the benefits take away the cost. So that is the charge. If you're spending your own money, you can do what you like with it, but you're not spending your money, you're spending someone else's money, the taxpayers' money or shareholders' money. So it's incumbent upon us to be able to show that we're doing something sensible with the money, because otherwise we tend to, we justify everything to ourselves. I was trying to buy another motorbike at one point. I've only got 3 in my garage here and another one in Australia, so I've needed a bike. And And my daughter said to me at the time, said, "Dad, why do you?" My elder daughter, why do you want another motorbike? You know, you've already got 3. I said, "Carly, how many pairs of shoes have you got?" And she said, "Oh, good point, Dad." And the point is, we all have things that we like, stuff that we enjoy, stuff that we love, and we tend to then justify an investment. Benefits shouldn't be the way that we justify investments. They're the rationale for making the investment. So this is why I think it's so important. Okay. And having said benefits is why we make investment, why invest in projects or programs on portfolios. Having said that, we're not very good at it, apparently. And you could debate, and we could have a wonderful debate about whether or how accurate this picture is. But all the research says, you know, success and failure rates range between 50 to 70%. The failure rate between 50 to 70%. Even the PMI says 50% of projects fail. And you think, Christ, you imagine if the Teachers Association of New Zealand said, we only fail half our children, or the doctors in New Zealand said, we only kill 50% of our patients. You'd say, what's wrong with you people? Go and get some training. You know, you're supposed to be professionals. But we could debate. I mean, really, it's the kind of the big stuff, the more complex. I think, you know, the smaller, less complex, usually we're pretty good at. But you know, we particularly got some business change aspects. Things tend to kind of go wrong. And James is going to be talking about infrastructure and all the fantastic work you guys, James and his guys, have been doing in New Zealand. And it has to be said, I mean, this is one of the Ben Flupia at Oxford, his specialist area is infrastructure projects the world over. And he talks about the record of infrastructure projects being, quotes, strikingly poor. So it's not a case of, well, you know, usually we do it well and occasionally we get it wrong. No, he's saying, you know, this is the nature of the beast. It's not quite as good as it should be. Strikingly poor performance records, according to Ben Flupia. What was that? Just if I can find it. Oh yeah. This is from the Harvard Business Review recently about IT. This is from, it said, of the $1.3 trillion, that's US dollars, spent on digital transformation in 2018 in the US, 900 billion. So 900 billion out of 1.3 trillion went to waste, according to the Harvard Business Review. So the problem has been around for quite some time. Projects struggle to show they've realized benefits, and there's a whole load of explanations for that. And I've done some work with Scott previously. I think we did a couple of videos about optimism bias and examples of optimism bias, and people kind of like that stuff, and it sounds great and it's really interesting stuff, except I increasingly come to the view it's got very little in terms of how many errors are caused by optimism bias. I think it's a convenient excuse. I'm up with that quote on the screen. Essentially, we do stuff because we want to do it, and we want a new IT system. Soldiers like tanks, sailors like boats, teachers like schools, doctors like hospitals, and then we're caught. We want another hospital. How much is it going to cost? 10 million, 15 million. Wow, we're going to have to find benefits of 20 million, and the game begins. We go looking for benefits to justify what we want to do. And then we shouldn't come as a great surprise that it kind of unravels afterwards, because we don't use benefits. We're not investing to realize benefits. We're investing to do whatever we think needs to be done. So we're focusing on the results. We're focusing on the activity rather than the result. But you can see there, John Cotter, up to 70% fail to realize the benefits. So what I want to do is kind of think about three of the kind of main kind of shifts of the whole emphasis. Because if most projects are set up just to do stuff, and then we use the benefits to justify, then no wonder they're not realized in practice. And this came. I was an optimism bias adherent, spreading the message and looking at this stuff. And I did a session for a consulting firm in London a few years ago after the global financial crash. And I went in there and I did my spiel about benefits for about an hour. And at the end of it, this load of consultants said, "Steve, we'd love to do what we agree with you. We'd love to do what you're talking about." But they don't employ us to write the business case to tell them the truth. They employ us to write the business case to justify the project. If we tell them the truth, then they're just going to go and give the job to Capgemini or Pricewaterhouse or Ernst & Young. And, from the mouths of babes, these are the guys that are paid to write business cases. And the bottom line is we write business cases to justify what we want to do anyway. Kind of a pointless exercise. So how do we shift? How do we shift the emphasis? Well, the most obvious way, first of all, is program management, because if you look at the kind of research going back 20, 30 years, program management seemed to evolve to address two problems. First of all, the problem that projects don't appear to realize the benefits they were set up to deliver. And so that was one of the kind of rationales for the development of program management. The idea being that we put all projects into a program, and we add on the business change required, and everything that's required to realize the benefits goes into a program. So we can have projects to deliver outputs as per the MSP type model, as illustrated on the left and on the right. And the program can manage all that activity to achieve the outcome or to realize the benefits, whatever. So that was the first driver. The other driver actually was to do with governance. As projects were undertaking more and more projects, the board was becoming overwhelmed. And so the idea is what we'll do is if you've got if the board can manage 20 projects, but now we're up to 200, well, put the 200 into 20 programs, and then we can have a reporting up to the board at a program level, and the programs manage the projects. So those were the kind of drivers behind program management. That's the origins of program management. And that's the whole concept of MSP, as I say, shown in the model there on the left-hand side from Ross Garland and Adrian Morey. Adrian's an Australian, Ross is an Australian, well, Pommy Australian Ross. He's back in the UK now, but used to live in Brisbane. Adrian Morey, well-known, excellent book on project governance, by the way. Very similar to the model on the right-hand side there. The idea that we put projects into a program, and then the program manages or resolves the issue about projects deliver outputs and programs deliver outcomes. So, and I think Rod is coming along to one of your two of your sessions in April, Scott. So that's excellent. So anyone's into that kind of MSP world, a lot of work. Rod will be talking. I think he was on the 5th and the 6th of April, but don't blame me if I'm wrong. Scott, it is great, excellent. So I would recommend, because Scott is Mr. MSP. That's one solution. Number two, portfolio management, because you'll see at the bottom there, the quote from the NAO. This is the National Audit Office, Office of Government Commerce, quite a while ago. But the lack of strategic, lack of linking projects to strategy is the number one cause of failure, or was identified as the number one cause of failure. I was at a session, this guy, Antonio Nieto Rodriguez, the author of the book on the left-hand side of your screen. Antonio, very impressive guy, ex-chairman of PMI Global. And Antonio wrote this rather good book, The Focused Organization. Nothing new there. There's a lot of the stuff he said has already been said. But he talks about the fact you should start with your strategy and then commission the projects and programs to deliver to your strategy. And if you do that, then the problem about project-led or benefits-led projects kind of disappears, because you commission projects and programs to deliver your strategy, and you focus on the most important things required to achieve those strategic objectives. And so you address that bottom quote there from the NAO and the OGC, because the link is inherent. But the reality is, in the big blue box, our CEO defines strategic projects as expensive projects without a business case. And my good friend Anand Samwal, who was head of corporate portfolio management for American Express, said strategy was the justification of last resort. When you can't justify a project under any other means, you call it a strategic project. And I have to tell you guys, that's my experience, because we had in the UK, and one of my portfolios that I used to run, we had these big expensive IT projects and programs, very expensive actually, and very big. And someone said, well, what portfolio category do they sit in? And they said, well, we're strategic. And we said, well, look, you're not saving any money, you're not generating any revenue, but you're saying you're strategic, but you can't tell us what difference you're going to make to your organization's strategy. Therefore, you're not strategic. And they all kind of shuffle their feet underneath the table. And that's the point. If it is a strategic project, you should be able to say specifically what impact will this project deliver, will it make, what difference will it make to our strategic objective? And we should be able to validate that with the strategic owner. And that's the point. I'm going to talk about some of that a bit more tomorrow, about the benefit owner concept, about someone in the business who's the pull for what the project's delivering. I used to say to one of our smaller IT projects, if I cancelled you, I was the portfolio director, if I cancelled your project, would the phone start ringing? I said, well, you can't do that, Steve. You can't do it. I said, no, but if I did, would the phone start ringing from users saying, or business managers saying, you can't cancel it, we need it? And they said, no. I said, then why are you doing it? You know, you're doing it in your bedroom in secret and no one knows anything about it. It's ridiculous. So there has to be a pull from the organization. So we'll be talking about that tomorrow. So if anyone find a bit more, see you tomorrow. So having said that, so what does this mean at a portfolio perspective? Well, what it means, we should start with our strategy. We should essentially design a series of benefits categories that apply to all projects in our portfolio. And this is an example from the ONS in the UK, and people have heard me speak before, will have seen it before, and will have remember you saying, people say, I can't read your slides, Steve. Well, you're not supposed to be able to read the slides to remind me. But in essence, what I've said here was I went into the ONS and I said, look, so what are your strategic drivers on the left-hand side? What's forcing us to do anything? And they listed those, and then given those strategic drivers, what are our investment objectives? What's forcing us to do anything? And then we identified some benefit categories that worked for this organization. So every project then would articulate its benefits under those headings. So we had the middle box is the financial benefits, reduced expenditure, or a net revenue generation. This has to be a cash flow impact, risk reduction at the bottom, and various types of risk reduction. But at the top was about this was about the quality and quantity of the statistics we produce, and we produce statistics not for our own use, but for use by stakeholders, by users. And so we measured the benefits in terms of user value under that heading. So if we had longer, I could talk about a bit more about that. But the idea is that we develop a benefits categorization framework specific to the organization. None of this financial, non-financial mumbo jumbo. Actually specific, what do we mean by the non-financial? What are our strategic objectives? We start with that and define the benefits. As my good friends at the PMI said, and I would have paid the PMI to say this, but they said it anyway, so I didn't have to pay them. Project benefits synonymous with positive strategic impacts. So start with your strategy. What does the strategic impact look like? And then we define benefits in those terms. So 2 ways of addressing this, making sure projects are benefits focused. One, start with, put your projects into a program, or look at things from a portfolio perspective. The portfolio being, if we look back at my previous slide, if I can get back there, that the portfolios are linked to strategic objectives. So we've got these 2 different ways of doing it. The third way is we can say, look, let's start with the project. And let's start with the end in mind. And one of my favorite books, just happen to have it on my desk, of course, Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's brilliant. And it was brilliant back in the 1480s when he wrote it, and it is brilliant now. But habit number 2 is begin with the end in mind. So begin with the end in mind, or start with the end in mind. Don't start with all that stuff that you want to do. Start with the impact that you want to achieve, the results that you want to achieve, and then design the project to deliver those results, those outcomes, those benefits. And the model that kind of reflects that thinking is the Victorian investment logic map there on the left-hand side. I'm not saying to anyone you have to use that model. What I'm saying is that kind of makes sense to me. Start with a problem. When you know what the problem is, then you define the benefits. And of course, the examples given there aren't very good, but of course, that's my view. But it says strengthen the Victorian community. What does strengthen the Victorian? That's benefits are supposed to be measurable. Well, what does strengthen the Victorian community mean? Weightlifting? I don't know. But so what's the problem? What's the benefit? And then the solution is designed to deliver the benefits. We do that, our problems kind of go away. On the right-hand side, just to say, look, focus on the investment driver. Why are we doing this project? Is it to save money or to generate revenue? In which case the benefits are how much money we're going to save or how much increased revenue are we going to collect. Or we're doing it because we have to. It's a mandatory requirement. In which case benefits aren't really important. I mean, look, guys, if you lived in some weird place that was exposed to, I don't know, say floods, random floods, out of the blue, terrible floods, where would this place be? Now, if I lived in that sort of place and I said to the guys, and they said, Steve, what are we doing about getting people out and rescuing them and getting the water levels down? I said, well, we're just writing the business case to show a cost benefit, the benefits exceed the cost. They'd say, are you insane? We've got to get out there. We've got to save people. We've got to get the water levels down. The two things you'd want to know is not the benefit. You would want to know, is what you're going to do going to be effective? Why do we think it's the right thing to do to solve the problem? The problem is we're flooded. So we want to know that you are going to do what you say you're going to do will make a difference. And then secondly, you want to know it's the most cost-effective way of doing it. You don't want to waste money. I mean, imagine if you lived in a world where there was a pandemic, for example. And if you didn't ask those two questions, you tend to get up, you might think, well, we need some protective equipment, masks and so on. And it wouldn't happen in the real world, of course, but the government would end up spending lots of money on stuff that couldn't be used by the National Health Service. And so the taxpayer funded, and I'm not bitter about this, but the taxpayer spent my money, the politicians spent my money by all that PPE, and their chums got rich on the back of it. So where's the accountability? So mandatory, though, the point, mandatory, it's not about benefits, this is the most cost-effective way of doing this, the thing, solving the problem that we face. The strategic contribution is where it's at. What is the understanding the strategic, what are our strategic measures? And then we're back to the portfolio management aspect again, because we're about saying, what do benefits mean in this organization, given our strategic objectives? Given our strategy and our strategic objectives, the PMI says project benefits are synonymous with strategic impacts. So what does that mean for our organization? And then we can start moving forward, because each project should be set up to deliver those specific specific benefits. But one last point, and that is, what this means is spending a bit more time up front working out what the problem is and working out what the benefits would be. And my good friends at the IPA, the Infrastructure and Projects Authority in the UK now, have come up with this model. They call it front-end loading. Spend more time up front, as the NAO said. We just don't tend to spend enough time. And what this model shows is that if you want to influence the benefits, the best time to influence the benefits is at the beginning. Because normally people start looking at benefits when someone comes asking about the benefits after it's been developed and implemented. Bit late. Let's start influencing things up front. Having said, though, what we have to solve the problem. Start with the problem you want to solve. But the problem is, one of the hardest things to do is actually working out what's the problem. What is the problem you're facing? And you say, well, but Steve, it's obvious. Quite often, we know that Auckland is flooded. We've got to get the pumps, and absolutely. But I say, but we need to know that the pumps are the right sort of pump and in the right sort of place. And just to illustrate that point, in the book, Managing Benefits, we included the Cobra effect. This is where the Brits went to India. They got to Delhi, and it was Cobra everywhere. So they said, well, we don't like Cobra. They bite people. It's not nice. So they launched a scheme. They said, anyone that kills kill a Cobra, we'll give you 50 rupees or whatever it was. That was mistake number one. So because you don't have to be a genius to work. People started killing Cobra, bringing them in. The Brits gave them 50 rupees, and then someone got the idea: why don't we start breeding Cobra? This is an income generation opportunity. And I'm telling you, they didn't start. They didn't start just breeding. I've got pet pet Cobra and I borrow another one, and they have babies. No, they did it on an industrial scale. There were these farms breeding Cobra, and then the Brits, when they discovered this, they made their second mistake. They cancelled the scheme. So all these guys who've been breeding Cobra to collect their 50 rupees, just let them go. The net effect was there were more Cobra in Delhi after the scheme than there were beforehand. And on the right hand, there's an example from the UK again, where everyone thought this was a way that we were trying to become greener, carbon reduction scheme. What we're going to do is, and they trialed it for a year, and they said, it works. We're going to give people these special bins, and the more recycling stuff you put into your recycling bin, the more money you collect points, and the points get converted into money. And you can, and they thought this was jolly good, and they thought it was a very green thing to do. You don't have to be a genius to work out, what's really happening. What really happens, of course, is just got to remind myself. It said it would essentially the scheme. It rewards, first of all, the problems with this scheme. Number one, it rewards people to produce more recyclable waste rather than taking steps to reduce the amount they produce in the first place, which is what we want. Secondly, it rewards individuals for recycling disposable stuff by giving them the chance to buy more disposable stuff. And thirdly, it does nothing about the main source of our household waste, which is unnecessary packaging used by shops and suppliers. So the point is, make sure that we're solving the right problem, because we tend to jump to the solution. So front-end loading, systems thinking. There we go. Hopefully I didn't run over too much, Scott.
No, that's fine. And there's actually been no complaints about your slides, surprisingly. So, I'm pretty impressed about that. We've got a very tolerant group listening in.
Do people normally complain about my slide? That one that no one can read. Okay, yeah.
Interestingly, I saw a LinkedIn post recently from Andy Murray. He's from the Major Projects Association and wrote the Prince 2 manual back in 2007 or something, some years ago. And he talked about strategic misrepresentation. Which,
well, he doesn't. That's Ben Flupia.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
Ben Flupia. Yeah.
I think he talked about it. Oh, there we go. We've got dogs in the background. I think he talked about it from the perspective of an APMG SIG, that's the Association of Project Management in the UK. They're having a discussion specifically around strategic misrepresentation, and that is lying, as you've mentioned before.
Yeah, the planned, systematic, deliberate misstatement of cost of benefits in order to get projects approved. In short, that is lying. And I think there is some optimism bias, and I think there is some deliberate. But essentially, people are just they're putting the two together. The two work together, and they're saying we've got to justify the project because we know it's the right thing to do.
Yes.
Yeah, and they paid to write the business case to justify it.
Yeah, and I was having a chat to an organisation in New Zealand who have recently, not even recently, probably about 4 years ago, completely got rid of the whole concept of project management. And this is weird. This is very strange. They're mainly IT based, and they've gone completely agile, scaled agile framework. And they just don't write business cases. Yeah. And I was thinking, wow, that's pretty amazing. So I've got to learn a bit more about that to see how they're doing it, because there must be some way that they're ensuring that what they do is the right thing to do. And so one of the areas that they found particularly difficult at the moment actually was working out which was the priority, how to prioritize things.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So interesting.
I should say, when it comes to, if you're talking about business cases, one of the things I used to keep forgetting these things now, but Jenner's law, the bigger the business case, the worse the business case, because what they're trying to hide. If you've only got 20 pages, the key is, I'm not saying don't have a business case, absolutely, but keep them short and tell them, use templates about the information I want to see. What are the costs? What are the benefits? If the costs, this is my talk tomorrow. I mustn't give it away. If you want to know the questions, I had the ILM there, but I say you should challenge. And tomorrow I'm going to be talking about the challenges, the questions you need to ask. Okay.
Yeah. I think I know that Treasury in particular in New Zealand are we're really pushing back before the COVID days for short, brief business cases. Try and put your business case on an A4 page and see if it holds water at that perspective.
Absolutely right.
They were definitely encouraging people to be a bit more trying to save paper, basically.
I did
And
some work with
you're
with the Treasury guys.
with Treasury.
I did some work with Jonathan Kirk and Grant. I've forgotten Grant's surname now. Really good guys, and they got their community of interest in Wellington, and I think it's Auckland as well. I think they have over 200 people, or did have in that benefits community of interest cross government. Really, really impressive, and they've done some excellent work. And I remember having a chat. We ran a session in I think it was Wellington. And we ran a corner, and I was having the chat, and I said, "Christ, I'm talking about benefits with a guy in a uniform. He's a soldier, you know." And then you think, the world's changing when you're not talking to guys in suits. You're actually talking about benefits to guys in uniform. So really good. Yeah, they've done lots of interesting stuff. Lots of people in the New Zealand public service doing lots of really interesting work in this field. And I apologise for forgetting Grant's surname. Someone's going to hopefully put it in the chat.
That'll be there. They will indeed. And your example with regards to benefits in relation to recycling hit a bit of a chord for me, and I think this highlights the fact that benefits management and benefits considerations are everywhere. So I was in another life. I was at least a PNC president, which is a Parents and Citizens Association, like a PTA in New Zealand. I don't know if the PTAs even exist anymore. But anyway, we were being proposed by I don't know, some body. I'm not sure who it was. I think he represented the Scouts and belonged to another organisation as well. Being proposed to introduce a pay for recycling bottles scheme.
Right.
And I was there, and they were just pitching this whole idea, and they do it down in South Australia. This is it back in Australia, and they were pitching it as a way to encourage recycling. And I said to them, "But we have recycling. Those are all those yellow bins you see everything with the yellow top. That's recycling." And they said, "Oh, well, this means that the schools can make the money off the recycling." I thought, here's the rub. Okay, and lo and behold, what do you think people do when they're told, "Hey, those bottles that you currently put in that yellow bin, you can bring down to the school and get paid for them. The school will make money, or you'll make money, or there'll be a bit of a cut, half and half." And lo and behold, people are going into the yellow bins, getting the recycling out of the yellow bins, taking them to the school, and then getting some money as a result. And
absolutely.
I couldn't believe this. I was like, "Look, guys, what you're doing is you're moving the recycling from the yellow bins to the school. And if anything, you've got extra carbon emissions. You've got so many things that just make this."
And the message you send, of course, the message you've sent is you shouldn't do it because it's the right thing to do. You want to save the planet. It's better for everyone. It's better for you. Should none of that. You know, forget that. This is just a financial transaction. It's outrageous. Right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
The economists have taken over. You know, this has got to change, guys. This is a revolution. You know, I want these people out. Don't mess with my brain.
You're right.
Yeah.
Very true. Okay, so we've now got we'll move on. Let me just check to see if there's any questions coming from the group. No.
Better stop my screen share.
Grant Petrick. Apparently, you've been told.
Absolutely.
Mike Ryan's come up with it. Mike Ryan helps.
Thanks, Mike.
Mike from WorkSafe. I appreciate that.
Hi, Mike. Excellent. No, Grant is a superstar. Absolutely. But there were so many. There were people all over, like doing really interesting stuff.
So we've got a great collection of people who have joined us. We've got people from iwi. We have people. These are project managers. We've got people from the DHBs who are going through a big change at the moment, away from the DHB framework into a framework yet to be envisaged with regards to project management. We've got a lot of people who are coming from the councils as well. We've got Hamilton Council, we've got Auckland Council. We've got a lot of people basically all from around the country who are interested in project, even international people. I saw some people from Canada are joining us, people from Australia, all interested in project management. We do actually have a question though from Ricardo Cantu. He's asked, how different has benefit management come with the agility philosophy and frameworks like scaled agile? How do you
Yeah.
feel as though, have you seen any major changes there?
But me, yeah, I think
Yeah,
I'm a
benefit.
huge fan of agile. The point, of course, is what agile does, it changes the whole debate, because this whole idea that leave me alone, let me write 1,000-page business case, and even then, then we track against those benefits, maybe and maybe not, until a gateway review occurs. That's gone. The point is, the whole point about agile is, if I'm not seeing benefits next Monday, why are we doing it? Agile ultimately is about benefit, but it's about benefit, and we need to make sure we've got a consistent language. This is the point. This is why the portfolio of benefits framework is so important. That then guides the agile activity. And the fact that you have a project sponsor, or whatever, I can't remember the language, it varies between different, Scrum and the various types of agile. But you have someone who's the guy that controls the project backlog, whoever that person is in your language. That's the person that says, right, this is the next thing to do. They're prioritizing on an active basis. So that should be benefits led. And we should be seeing the benefits, more actively. It's not a formalized benefits process, but thank God it's not. No, I'm a big fan of agile, but of course you use agile when it's appropriate. I thought if someone said to James, we're building a new motorway between Wellington and or new railway line between Wellington and Auckland, once the floods go down, I'm going to build that new railway, and we want you to build an agile railway. Well, maybe they do, but I don't know. It doesn't seem to me we'll build 5 miles and then we'll stop and think, is it the right thing? No. You go, if you're going to build a railway, you build a railway. But the principles agile, the principles adapt and learn. Absolutely right. Constantly revisiting what you're doing. Is this the right thing to do? Is this the best way to do it? Continually doing that. That's benefits led. That's the whole point.
And Carl's mentioning, he thinks it's interesting we're still using Victorian industrial models in the 21st century.
Absolutely.
And he's not convinced these legacy approaches work in a complex world. But what do you think about CAS? And this is a Welsh word. Kienfin?
Yeah,
James, help us.
Yeah, I mean, it's Soden's model for project complexity, and absolutely you have complicated and complex. Absolutely, this is the complex stuff. There's a great quote I think he used about when you walk up to an airplane in a hangar carrying a box of tools, nothing changes. But walk into an office environment and say, we're putting a new system in next week, and the rumour mill starts, and and things start to change beyond what people imagine. So absolutely, the complex stuff, usually when you've got people involved. But what that highlights again, though, we haven't really mentioned it, but you kind of alluded to it, Scott. The point is, benefits is a stakeholder. This is not an accounting profession or a discipline. It's a stakeholder led. It's about engaging with stakeholders. This is not about designing an ITT system in secret. When the guy in Utrecht said to me, Steve, we're rolling out this IT system across the Netherlands, but we can't get the users to agree the benefits. Can you give us some advice? How do we encourage the suckers to agree to it? And I said, well, look, if you have to ask the question, therein lies your problem. If you design it, no, get out there. It should be designed by the user, co-design. The users should be involved from the very beginning. And that's what Agile's about. Agile's about involving people with a minimum viable product. Isn't there some sort of, that's the cheapest way to do it? No, minimum viable product is a way of seeing how the user uses it in the real world. And working with people to develop solutions. So I think
we've got some suggestions
from. Way of doing
things.
If the old way, if the old way worked, then there'd be a bit more of a problem. But the old way doesn't work. As has been shown, all research says projects and programs, fail to realise the benefits. And they say things like, well, we should write a business case. Good. Didn't know that. We should do post-implementation reviews. Oh, wow. What a breakthrough. You know, we've had all this stuff's been around for 30, 40 years. And it hasn't worked because what it is, we use them as tools and techniques. The stuff that James will be talking about, I'm sure, is about, it's a change. He won't be talking, well, I don't know what James is going to talk about, but it won't be about processes. I would have thought more about a mindset, a mind that says we focus on what matters to the citizen or to the user. We're driven by that. It's a mindset. It's not a tool set. Because the tools are always around. All we do is we misuse the tools. People get the new tool set and they misuse it to write even better business cases for bad ideas.
We've got a few suggestions from Tanya Gray, who's an IT team lead. She's got a few ideas on how to build railways, shipping mile by mile. Obviously, you know, you just create an extra town to the end of the mile, and you just keep going. Some great comments in there by Ricardo regarding innovation and how do you ensure that keeps going. So we'll definitely get some answers around those after the event. So any questions that you have for Steve or for James, please send to us via the chat, and I'm going to get Steve and James to provide some answers, and we'll send those out as add those onto the recording once we do the processing. So you get a little bit of a bonus extra. Let's move on to James though. So thanks very much, Steve. I really appreciate that.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys.
A lot of people were really looking forward to. Yeah, they were looking forward to hearing what you had to say. Got a big following down here in New Zealand, so done some great things. So now James is a transport guru. He's worked a lot with NZTA and worked with Auckland Transport and quite a few councils, so real hands-on experience with regards to ensuring transport decisions and strategy, etc., are well thought out. Does a great job in making sure business cases in those regions and those locations are up to scratch. And big changes going on at the moment with regards to urbanisation or urbanisation of people away from the countryside. We've got things like COVID maybe generating. What's that? No, I had someone talking in the background. Had some things like the changes around COVID making people maybe work from home more often, and that has an impact on transport. So James, I'll give you the floor. And just before I do that, everyone's pretty impressed by the train station you got behind you.
Yes, yeah, that's National Park train station down in the lower North Island, and that was when we had a summer. So, kia ora koutou, everyone. My name is James Llewellyn. I'm a transport planning and management consultant. Taith Consulting is my own business, which I set up back in the winter of last year when we had a winter. And I have been very interested for most of my career in sustainable transport, changing travel behaviour from the current paradigm, which is very much around using private cars as much as possible. So my presentation today starts with an observation, which is that relatively young cities like Auckland have grown significantly at the same time as the boom in car travel, which really started after World War II. And what that has resulted in is very, very high levels of car usage, which for a number of years was seen as very good. But increasingly over the last 20 to 30 years, a number of disbenefits have become apparent. And those include traffic congestion, which Aucklanders are very familiar with and complain about a lot. Local air pollution, vehicle crashes, and greenhouse gas emissions, to name but a few. So my challenge, and it's a pretty tough gig, is to try and persuade people to think about changing their travel behaviour. And in attempting to define and realise the benefits of promoting alternatives to car travel, there are a number of lessons learned both from the UK and here in New Zealand. Before I get into that, I just want to recap the key definitions in terms of capabilities, outcomes, and benefits from managing successful programs, which Steve referred to earlier. So a capability is a completed set of projects required to deliver a new outcome. The outcome is a new operational state, which is achieved after transition of that capability into live operations. And most importantly, of course, the benefit is the measurable improvement resulting from an outcome perceived as an advantage by one or more stakeholders, and which contributes to one or more organizational objectives. So back to that point that Steve made about having your strategy. And this short presentation discusses benefits management and realization when dealing with stakeholders who often have some degree of choice about what to do and how to behave. So about 25 years ago, the UK government introduced a new policy to persuade people to change their travel behaviour away from the private car. And whilst there has been some success over that period, the policies have not always had the desired impact. They haven't realised the benefits that perhaps the government thought they were going to deliver. So to take one example, there was a strategy to increase cycling as an alternative to the private car. And there was a target to double the levels of cycling between 2002 and 2006, and then double them again by 2012. So effectively, that was a 400% increase in 10 years. Pretty ambitious. The actual increase, looking at the data the other day, was just under 40%, and there hasn't been much change in cycling levels since then. So the benefits were not realised to the extent that the government thought they would be through that cycling strategy. So as someone who's been involved in transport planning for over 25 years, it's my view that a major reason for the lack of impact is that insufficient numbers of stakeholders have bought into the need to change their travel behaviour because they do not perceive personal benefits in doing so. So we can ask ourselves, in any situation or any project setting where stakeholders have at least some degree of choice as to how to use the capability provided by a set of projects, what are the key lessons learned from transport planning to help manage and realise benefits? So the first lesson learned is not to assume that other people are as committed to you to changing their behaviour. Quite often they aren't, and it's necessary to work with their ability to choose a course of action that perhaps you do not believe is beneficial. So the recent British Social Attitude Survey shows that 81% of people who don't believe in climate change are not willing to change their car travel behaviour. So that's not really a huge surprise. But far more surprisingly, 52% of people who do believe that climate change is at least partly the result of human action are also not willing to reduce their car travel. They're actually much more in favour of buying a car with lower CO2 emissions because they perceive that course of action as offering them greater benefits. The second lesson is therefore to understand motivations for behaviour. Ideally obtain robust and statistically valid evidence as to why people behave in the way that they do, and therefore how amenable they may be to change and realise benefits that perhaps they hadn't even appreciated. So from the middle of the 2000s, there were a number of studies which revealed that the attitudes that people have to travel are not only linked to their behaviour, but they also differ according to where people live. So people living in suburban neighbourhoods often have very positive attitudes towards driving a car, whilst those living in denser, more urban type of neighbourhoods closer to city centres tend to have positive attitudes towards using public transports and active travel, so walking, cycling, scootering. There are other studies which reveal that travel behaviour can influence attitudes. So the built environment, the place you live, can stimulate certain use of travel modes, whilst also improving attitudes towards those modes. So moving to an urban neighbourhood may stimulate active travel directly, for example, because of short distances from your house to key destinations like shops, schools, your place of employment, but also foster positive attitudes towards active travel. The third lesson learned is something that Steve has already alluded to. So this is around co-design, co-designing projects with your beneficiaries. So people who are at least open to change should be closely involved in the planning design process so that they have ownership of the capability that's created and then can therefore realise the benefits themselves. I do a lot of work down in Wellington, and Greater Wellington Regional Council is currently undertaking a co-design approach to its accessibility action plan. And this involves facilitated sessions with communities. And the idea is to build and deepen equal collaboration between all citizens, irrespective of who they are, who are affected by or attempting to resolve a particular accessibility challenge. And the approach really is to make these people experts of their own experience and ensure they become central to the service design process, as well as making trade-offs between different options when things like budget constraints become an issue. Now, there are drawbacks to this approach, of course, in that, as Steve has alluded to, the time taken perhaps to get policies decided, projects moving, and benefits realised can increase. But as Steve also made very, very clear, if one takes a long-term view, it is arguably much, much better to take the time up front to ensure that those benefits can actually be identified and realised, rather than doing so after the event and producing a management plan when actually it's all rather too late. The fourth lesson learned is quite an interesting one. Working with younger people, they're actually much more open-minded about the potential benefits of active travel and alternatives to the car. And they also have a longer-term time horizon and can even carry forward positive habits for travel behaviour into later life. So I've done a lot of work over the years with schools on travel plans and safe routes to school infrastructure projects. And the education process has enabled various benefits of active travel to school to be identified. So that might include health, independence, social interaction with your peers, that kind of thing. And that's influenced both the travel behaviour of children themselves, but also, crucially, parents through their children, because quite often we found that children didn't have a choice in travel behaviour. They were ferried everywhere by car by anxious parents who were worried about them getting hit by a car or stranger danger or whatever. But these projects enabled pupils and parents to realise there were benefits, and also to tackle issues that young people are really concerned about, particularly climate change, because young people have a far higher stake in the benefits of tackling climate change. So the result was that it was much easier to not only make a case for projects to be implemented, but the users actually then directly benefited from those projects. There's a theory called peak car, which suggests that as younger people become adults, they're actually taking what they have learned at school into their adult travel behaviour, because they've experienced the benefits of walking or cycling much more. The evidence is that many, many more young people, particularly in the UK, are choosing not to obtain their car licence as soon as they possibly can, which was certainly the case when I was a youngster. So now young people are actually delaying that process and using walking, cycling, public transport much more. The next lesson learned is to work with disadvantaged people. These are people who have been forgotten by the car-based able-bodied society, and as a result have actually limited choice as to how they travel. And their lives can actually be transformed, and the benefits they experience beyond recognition by the transport choice they currently don't have. So transport disadvantaged people include elderly, disabled, young people, those living in geographically peripheral areas who don't have access to a car. So Greater Wellington Regional Council have introduced an on-demand transport service, which was originally targeted at commuters. But they subsequently found that the users, i.e. the beneficiaries, were mainly elderly and disabled people who previously either didn't travel or else had to pay very, very expensive taxi fares. So once the actual benefits of that project were understood, the council then extended the service to cover a retirement village and therefore widen both the catchment area and the benefits. And this has proved to be hugely advantageous to residents who now enjoy the ability to undertake spontaneous travel, which most of us would take for granted. The last lesson learned is to look for synergistic benefits from other projects or policy areas and claim them. And this isn't as cynical as it might sound, as people may perceive there are benefits to your particular project because some other policy or project has influenced their thoughts, feelings, and behaviour. And there may also be wider policy benefits of a transport project. So back to the discussion about urban living, there is evidence to suggest that more people moving to higher density cities, which is reversing the previous trend of suburbanisation, is actually influencing travel behaviour to a much greater extent than just providing more travel choice or transport infrastructure on its own. So the transport projects can synergize and claim benefits from these wider urban planning regeneration projects. And the final point is there are really strong wider policy benefits, be it physical health, social mobility, mental health, associated with travelling by modes other than the private car. And these lifestyle benefits, which people can directly experience, can be a really important motivator for people, perhaps more so than even issues such as climate change. That's really all I'd like to say. I'd particularly like to thank Scott and Stephen for this opportunity to talk to you all today, and I'm happy to take any questions either now or subsequently. Thank you. You're on mute, Scott.
I was just miming. That was my mime attempt. I don't know if you ever got the walls. I was around. I'm interested to hear Steve's view on that idea, and I'll ask you to unmute in preparation for claiming the benefits from other projects. What do you reckon? Is that a little bit how do I say parasitic to claim the benefits of other projects, particularly in an environment where people are desperately looking for benefits, or is that sort of kosher?
Look, I've got to be honest with you. Before we came online, I was out earlier, and these ideas pop into your head as you think about them. And I had all these arguments. We used to have projects competing, but I want some of your benefit, and you want some of my benefit. I would, from my experience, when that's happening, there are no benefits. It's why are they doing it? Why, if your project is set up to realize the benefits, if you really are, if you're as James was talking about, if you're co-designing and working, then the benefits are clear, and your benefits and your stakeholders recognize them. Yeah, the problem arises when you've got projects where they want the benefits to justify the enormous sums of money they're investing. That's when the problem, and then the argument starts. Ultimately, well, look, the point is, if you take a program approach, as Rod has talked about, and as James was referring to as well, if you've got a program approach, or even a portfolio approach, for the example I give, let's say I want to lose some weight. Don't need to, clearly. So Steve, why are you doing that? But, sometime in the past, I may have been slightly larger. So I decided I want to lose some weight. So what am I going to do? Do a bit of reading. And so you change your diet. You change not only what you eat, but when you eat. You might introduce intermittent fasting. You must right along this maybe do some exercise, but what sort of exercise? And do different types of exercise at different types of the day. Lots of research about when you exercise, men versus women, about which is more effective. So you do all of that and you lose some weight. At no point do you then say, oh, I wonder how much was caused by changing my diet. How much was caused by fasting? How much was caused by... You can't unpick these things. Often they work together. And so if you have a program of activity, you're focused on, or the portfolio, you're focused on the strategic objectives or the outcomes that you've got to deliver, then the problem... I mean, yes, you want to make sure as best you can that the stuff that you're doing will have the impact, but you monitor it. And if you're moving the right, if you start losing the weight, then you carry on doing it. It's the same with anything. If you want to bring your blood pressure down, again, why would you? Well, if the doctor has told you you've got to do something about your blood pressure, Steve, don't go on the. Don't get so excited. Just chill out. But if you do,
we're getting a bit close here, aren't we, Steve? We're getting a bit close.
Personal. No, but the point is, you look at so what's causing slightly elevated blood pressure? Well, and then you take, you do whatever, 15 things. Again, you never know, was it this or that? But you look at the research, and that's what we do in our own lives.
Yep. Sorry, mate. James, have you got a non-personal health example of how a project is run, and then it goes, wait a minute, we're realizing that what we're doing is actually giving benefits to these guys who have a project to do X, Y, Z. They should take some of those benefits, or they see them and they want to take them. Is there an example? Have I got the gist right from you?
Yeah, I think the most topical example I can think of at the moment is the Auckland light rail project, which has been rumbling on in various guises for a few years now, ever since I've been in New Zealand. And my view is that on its own as a transport project, Auckland light rail will struggle to deliver sufficient transport benefits on its own. But if it is viewed as a city-shaping urban regeneration project, which is strategic and helps to deliver all kinds of wider urban planning, affordable housing outcomes, whatever it might be, that is a completely different dynamic and different discussion. And so, as a transport planner, I've always been taught for years and years and years to just focus on the transport benefits. Because that's what the old Department for Transport guidance told you to do. But the reality is that your transport project is just part of a much wider system of different policies, all of which have interactions with each other. And the real smart way to look at benefits is to understand those interactions and work out what those synergistic benefits actually are. So the walking and cycling projects, it's all about keeping people healthy, keeping them out of hospital, because you keep people out of hospital, then you reduce the pressure on your health service. But you've got to be able to work with the other policy areas such as health to have those benefits. So a good thing that the UK government did was they got the Department for Transport to actually do that and co-fund projects that both departments got benefits out of.
Now, I've actually got a question here from Michael Kane. He's asking why does who is receiving the benefits appear to be changing depending on the outcomes of the project? For example, a demand on buses was for a group that was not originally identified. I think it's in the reference to the older retirement area, which received the increase in scope of that project. I guess that's a valid claim, right? It's valid to say, look, if a project's set up to do one thing, you spy a few benefits on the side and you go, let's go after those. Is that a valid sort of way to run a project? Because, it's like, hey, you've got a strategic objective. Who knows if you're veering off that, or, are you really just looking for benefits to justify what you're doing? What do you reckon?
No, I don't think that's quite fair. I think, to be honest, the council didn't probably quite understand the target markets they were going out to, and they'd probably be the first to admit that. But what they were able to do is adapt the projects and understand that there were benefits they didn't think that would be captured that actually have been captured. And so rather than just canning the project and saying, well, it's all been a failure, they've actually learned as they've gone along and actually adapted that project to deliver actually probably much greater benefits to people who are without a transport choice whatsoever, because it's clear that the commuters who that we're targeting are still travelling to the train stations in particular that the service was due to integrate with. So the benefits for those people are still there, but they're not as a result of the project. So I think it's a good lesson learned that, yes, be very clear who your benefit target markets are. And if you get into a project and you do your monitoring evaluation, which Greater Wellington are really, really good at, and you discover that things are actually slightly different, then, that is kind of a bit of a definition of agile. And you say, well, actually, folks, it's not quite worked out the way we want. We've got these other things. These are benefits worth having because these are people with absolutely no choice. And so I'm a great believer in that you can actually deliver benefits for quite a few people as long as those benefits are really significant for them. So a lot of transport projects are justified by small time savings for thousands or tens of thousands of people. And that in economic terms derives a huge benefit, but actually the people don't perceive it because it's actually only a few seconds per person. But you have 100 people who can travel to a day centre or a shop or an educational activity they couldn't have done before that transforms their lives. The benefits of those 100 people are absolutely significant.
Yeah, and that this sort of combines and melds a few ideas. I know Ricardo was previously talking about innovation, and we were also talking about agile. You've mentioned agile. I'm thinking, is this a place where we say, right, actually, you need almost like organizations should have an innovation hub. They should really push, and I know that Max is going to be talking about this tomorrow. They should really push that starting up phase of projects. I talk about it as a funnel. You have lots of projects that you're churning through to try and work out which is the best one to do. Because if you can have, say, I don't know, let's say 100 ideas, 50 of them go through to a concept business case to go, is it worthwhile? And then maybe some of these things like the benefits to elderly people remotely will come out of that. So rather than actually just start up the whole project and make it run, maybe we can find that information out earlier and therefore more redirect our resources to that immediately. So it's not a scope change with regards to going out to the retirement village, but it's actually part of the project. It's the project, enabling those people to actually travel more. Having this, I don't know, have you seen that sort of environment where there's like an innovation hub or if you talk to anyone who does early stage investing in the startup environment, I know we've got a few people online who are from the startup environment in IT, and they have a lot of churn of ideas and concepts. They'll prototype things and things like that. Is that something that could be adopted in a transport environment, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it already has, particularly in transport technology. So Waka Kotahi a few years ago set up the Connected Journey Solutions unit, which essentially performed that very function. So a bunch of really clever switched on people who brought a different mode of thinking to how we present and update travel information for the user. And what they were able to do was kind of put the user experience first and educate people like me who were always previously saying, well, this is my view of the world and that's what we're going to do. That's what we're going to give to the user. And these guys brought a completely different way of thinking into the process. And as you say, they had a whole heap of ideas on this huge whiteboard and prototyped them. Some worked really well. Some of them just didn't fly. But the point was, if you didn't have those ideas all in one place, you wouldn't be able to work out which were the ones that were really beneficial. So, you've got to kiss quite a few frogs before you get to your prince in transport. So not everything is going to work the first time. The world just doesn't operate like that. But the key thing is to learn quickly and adapt really quickly, which is exactly what Greater Wellington did with their on-demand service. It didn't transpire in the way they originally thought, but they were really clear and had a good plan in place to adapt it and actually deliver probably much greater benefits than they probably even realised at the time. So I think it's a great idea. More organisations should do it. We still, I think, in transport are a bit hamstrung by a lot of process that we've grown up with for many, many years, but it is changing, and we're getting new people, particularly younger people, into the profession now who have these ideas and are not willing to sort of settle for second best.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And you've actually got some support in the chat. Tanya Gray saying she thinks that the thing people miss is the current light rail option, and this is in reference to Auckland's light rail, is a first step. It's the subsequent additions, and referring to increments, being an agile IT developer, that will really unlock, the potential of that light rail. So yeah, I mean, you can go back and say, if we didn't have the Sydney Opera House, you wouldn't have an iconic building for Australia to show off. And those incremental changes, despite the overruns and the poor estimates. That was a classic example for you, Steve. I'm sure you used
it's ridiculous.
The Sydney Opera House.
Yeah, but they didn't set out to build an iconic building. They set out to build an opera house. And
that's right.
Irrespective of the cost, it's not a very good opera house. I mean, the acoustics are awful.
That's true.
Plus, you destroyed the reputation of the architect. And when the Australians eventually said, "Oh, well, we want to recognise the architect for this amazing thing," his son said, "Well, I'm not going." He would refuse to go and collect the award.
Yeah, no, I know the impact was huge.
The point is, yes, sometimes you get lucky, but you don't have to overspend by the scale they overspend. I'm not saying it's not a wonderful building. You're absolutely right. It's an iconic building, huge economic value to Australia, way beyond. But that wasn't the point of the investment, and that's just a happy outcome. But that doesn't always happen. No,
that's right. No, that's for sure. Okay. Look, this has been great, guys. Thank you very much for being available to chat, and thanks for being flexible in the change of venue and environment. And thank you everyone online who's been prepared to change the links. Now, these are all to do with our micro learning modules that we're creating. We've done a lot with Steve, and James is going to be getting involved as well.
Cool.
So we'll make sure everyone knows about those. So from Tauranga, that's the location, isn't it?
It is. Tauranga. Yep.
James? And from London, are you? I can't remember if you're actually in London or just outside of London.
I'm just outside London. Yeah, inside the tube.
Just outside of London. Okay. Yeah. Chathook. There we go. You've already got your light rail.
It's dry. It's dry here, guys.
I can't believe that. You guys not dry. Thank you very much, and thanks very much to everyone else. If you've got any further questions, feel free to post them in, and I'll get James and Steve to contribute. Cool. And remember, there's another event tomorrow. Steve's going to be there again, and we're going to have a great discussion